Amen. So you're in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, and this is the last poetic book, if you will. So the poetic books start from Job, and so you have Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and then Song of Solomon. So Song of Solomon is obviously a song. Actually, the first verse here, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon. So I don't have the verse in front of me where it says how many songs he wrote, but it talks about how many proverbs and then how many songs he wrote. So he actually wrote a lot of songs, but this is the Song of Songs. So I believe this is like his number one hit, if you will. I don't know if they had that, like a top 10, top 40 or anything like that of Solomon's songs, but this is it. This is the Song of Songs, right? And this is a love song between a husband and wife, specifically Solomon and his wife. Now, Solomon had many wives, and actually it alludes to that as far as that he had like 1,000 when it comes to his wives and concubines combined. But this woman is basically above them all. So if you're to look at this as far as like this is the chief wife, if that's a thing, like if when it comes to polygamy, it's kind of hard to think about that. But anyway, but that being said, is that this is a song between a husband and a wife. And really, when I look at the book of Song of Solomon, there are definitely things that point to the Lord and point to like the Lord with the church and stuff like that. But honestly, this book is just really, I believe, a great book for a husband and wife. And in the fact that there's nothing wrong with having a loving relationship, being romantic, and like all of that. I think sometimes, we get into this mode of like, in Christianity, it's just we should live this austere life, not enjoy anything, and just everything. You can't have a romantic relationship or anything like that. And it's just not what the Bible teaches. Or the fact that like, well, you shouldn't get married because they're going to distract you. You can do more for the Lord if you're not married and all this stuff. It's like, sure, that's, you could do that. But the Bible also says it's not good for the man to be alone. And that I will that the younger women marry, bear children, and guide the house. And I think that this is something that we should always be reminded of, that we should always be trying to keep the romance there in a relationship. Husbands and wives, we should always be trying to, not just because we're married, or we've been married for a long time, therefore we don't have to be romantic, we don't have to do anything like that. Now, as you all know, I'm a hopeless romantic, and I'm just like that. I mean, if you want to come to somebody that knows how to be romantic, come to me. And obviously, that's a joke. But that being said, is though, when you look at the book of Song of Solomon, it does kind of show you, like, here's how you should be thinking of your wife. Here's how your wife should be thinking of you. And it's something that we should strive for. And if anything, the book of Song of Solomon is something that spouses should be striving to have this type of relationship with their spouse, okay? And don't get me wrong, I don't believe this is the relationship you're always going to have with your spouse, and just every day, let him kiss me with his lips, and it's just like that's just the perpetual like state of being as your wife it would be towards you, or you're just like your teeth are as a flock of goats, and you're just like constantly talking about her beauty and all that stuff, which, just to be honest, you might get slapped in the face if you say something like that nowadays. But this first chapter, and I think the things you have to understand when you're going through the book of Song of Solomon is that the woman and the man are switching off speaking about each other, okay? So you got to know that from the very beginning, that at one point the woman's talking about him, and then it switches to him talking about her. And I believe there's some very easy details to know when that changes. And actually, chapter 1 is pretty much cut in half, if you will, as far as who's speaking. And you see the first half really is the woman speaking to him, okay? It says in verse 2, it says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine, because of the savor of thy good ointments. Thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me, we will run all after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee." And then it goes on to she talks about herself, and talking about the fact that her appearance and all of that. And it says, I am black but comely. And basically what this is stating is that she was basically had to be outside. So when it says that she's black, I think it's more that her skin has basically been really darkened because she's like forced to work outside and all of that. And it just gets into kind of her appearance and all of that. Verse 8, you see a switch to where he's talking about her, okay? And it's very easy. Now would anybody be confused here when in Song of Solomon 1 and verse 2 there, where it says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, who's speaking? Right? I think we all got it. Okay, it's the woman speaking about the man. Verse 8, it says, if thou know not, O thou fairest among women. So now you see a switch, don't you? That he's talking about her and saying she's fairest among women. Go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tents. I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses in Pharaoh's chariots. Thy cheeks are comely with rows of jewels, thy neck with chains of gold. We will make the borders of gold with studs of silver. While the king sitteth at his table, my spikenard sendeth forth the smell thereof. So now you see a switch again, right? You see, while the king sitteth at his table, my spikenard sendeth forth the smell thereof. So you kind of see this back and forth. You can imagine if, like songs like a duet where you have a man and a woman singing to each other, is kind of what Song of Solomon is. And the fact that they're going back and forth and all of that. Now, chapter 2, and why I emphasize that you really need to know who's speaking, like, is it the woman speaking, is it the man speaking? Because there's a whole song in our hymnal that is based off misunderstanding who's speaking here, okay? And it's called The Lily of the Valley, okay? And it's crazy to me that this is that this isn't our hymnal, or that this song was made, and the fact that the lily of the valley is likened unto the Lord Jesus, okay, in the song. And we don't sing that song. It's page 240 if you want to look it up. But it states that the chorus is the lily of the valley, the bright morning star, the fairest of 10,000. And the bright morning star is right. They got that one right. Okay, but the lily of the valley, this isn't talking about Solomon. And it's talking about the girl. It's talking about his wife. And the fairest among 10,000, that's also talking about a woman. That talks about her being the fairest among the daughters. And when it actually says of 10,000, it says the chiefest among 10,000s. That's talking about Solomon, okay? But I want you to read this, and I think it's very simple to know who's talking to who and who's the lily of the valley, okay? So look at verse 2 here. I'm sorry, chapter 2, verse 1. It says, I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. Okay, so at first you're kind of like, okay, well, who's talking? I think first cuff, though, I'd be like, that's probably a woman, right? I don't know if most men that are just like, I'm a rose, I'm a lily. I mean, I don't know about you, but when you call someone a buttercup, it's not exactly a compliment. Okay, but it says, now here's how you know who's speaking, because she says, I'm the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. And you're like, how do you know that? Because the next verse says, as the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. So who's the lily? Well, in verse 2, it's clearly her, right? Because he's saying, you're a lily among thorns, right? So is my love among the daughters. So being among the daughters means you're talking about a woman being among the daughters. A woman being among the daughters in the lily among thorns. We would usually say, like you're a rose amongst thorns, like in that type of thing. So, yeah, no, the lily of the valley is the woman. Now look at verse 3, because then she switches. So it's basically, she says, I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. As a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. So he's basically affirming that, right? She's like, I'm the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys, and he's basically affirming that as a lily among thorns, right? Meaning, like, not only are you the lily of the valley, In comparison, you're basically a lily that stands out among thorns, right? There's no comparison. It's not like you're the best lily among lilies. You're a lily among thorns, okay? So, Lily, this should be a good chapter for you. This will be like on your wedding thing right there. A lily among thorns. So, good news, it is talking about a girl. So, but in verse 3 here, it says, as the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. So who is the man referred to as? An apple tree. Okay? And I don't know if an apple tree is a lot more manly than a lily. Okay? So when you look at this, just separate this being about the Lord, about the church, or anything like that. It makes sense that the woman is a rose and the woman is a lily and the man is a big burly apple tree. Okay? I mean, that's what I would want to be anyway. But it's very clear because the lily among thorns is likened unto my love among the daughters, and the apple tree is talking about him among the sons. Okay, so I'm belaboring this way too much. Okay, but I just want to make a point. I've literally brought this up because I've gone to other churches. You know, I wasn't always a pastor. I used to sit in the pews as well. And I remember bringing this up and like, this is clearly talking about a woman. You know, so why are we singing this song, The Lily of the Valley? And I just wouldn't sing it. I'm just, to be honest with you, I just wouldn't sing the song. I wasn't trying to make a big stink about it, but I was just basically like, how is this supposed to be the Lord, you know, in this passage? And I remember getting a whole like dissertation on like something in Isaiah about Sharon or something like that and everything else. And it was so like out in left field. I'm like, how does this even apply to what we're even talking about? So there's really no argument for it. I just don't understand. I think someone just read this and they're just like trying to attach the Lord to everything in this chapter. I don't look at it as nefarious. I don't think the person that wrote The Lily of the Valley is some like person that's trying to pervert the Lord necessarily or anything like that. I just think that they were just applying everything that's symbolistic in here to the Lord. I don't know. But we don't sing that song, but that's why. But it says, as the apple tree among the trees of the woods, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. Now, what you have to understand is that in the book of Song of Solomon, it's obviously a love song, is that there's a lot of symbolism, but a lot of euphemisms, right? So what's a euphemism? Well, a euphemism is basically something to describe something that would probably be otherwise crude, okay? So I'll give you a very well-known euphemism, which is Adam knew his wife Eve, okay? That's a euphemism, right? Because knowing something is like, obviously when we say like, I knew that or I know that, we're just talking about having knowledge of it, right? But we all know that when it says Adam knew his wife Eve and she conceived, what that means, okay? So in the book of Song of Solomon, you're going to have a lot of euphemisms where it's going to, on the surface, kind of seem like we're just talking about a garden. We're just talking about like different things that, you know, whatever. But a lot of this is dealing with the relationship of a man and a wife and just giving you discrete details, right? This is a love song, but it's very discrete. You know, the Bible's very discreet. The Bible's very wholesome. So there's no problem with reading this book to your children, right? Now, as an adult, you could look at this and be like, I know what they're talking about, right? I know what they're talking about, you know, all this stuff and all that. But also it talks about like body parts, but it's very discreet. And if anybody's like upset, I can't believe you said breast. It's like, well, the Bible is the Bible. And you know what? If you don't like that term, get over it, okay? But you know what? The Bible uses discrete language when it comes to like the anatomy. Anything that's where the nakedness is at, which is the loins to the thighs, it usually uses very, very wholesome language like privy member, things like that. It's like, it's a private member, essentially. Like, it's basically like private parts, right? And so it's very discreet. It's not using crude language. Which shows you that you can have a love song that is discreet, holy, right, and it could still be talking about the love of a man towards a woman, okay, and vice versa. Obviously, the woman towards the man. This one always kind of sticks out to me. Let's just keep reading there as far as what she says in chapter 2 here. It says in verse 4, it says, "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love." And this is where we get that term, lovesick. Okay, this doesn't mean she's actually sick, like throwing up. Okay, this is lovesick. You're lovesick, meaning that you're basically in a state of I guess, infatuation, to the point of where you're just kind of like just overcome with this, to where you can't even think about anything else. Like you could maybe even be to the point where you kind of feel sick just because it's just so overwhelming with the emotions, right? But this is where we get that idea of lovesick. So she's basically lovesick for her husband, and it says, "His left hand is under my head, and his right hand doth embrace me." So this is just the typical, basically, like you're holding your wife with your left hand under her head and your right hand embracing her, right? The typical, like, I don't know, what is that, the World War II, like, photo of the century, right? Where he's, like, kissing the woman like this, right? Anyway, so this is obviously showing you just what she thinks about, what she likes, okay, and all that. This one just always sticks out to me, because I think when it comes to a husband and wife relationship, is the fact that just the idea of, take the romance out of it, the idea that you care about your spouse. And this verse just kind of sticks out to me about how she cares about him. Okay, what it says here in verse 7, it says, "I charge you, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and by the hinds of the field, that ye stir not up, nor awake my love till he please." I don't know if there's anything more loving than letting your spouse sleep. And all the women said amen, right? I'll say it for you. But wave your hanky, I don't know. But just that idea of, like, you care about that they get, like, that they're not disturbed, that type of thing, is that just kind of speaks to just this love that you have for that person, okay? And, when you're married for a little bit, then you look at your spouse that's sleeping soundly, and you hate them for that. And you're like, why do you get to sleep? Why do you deserve rest? And we kind of have to go back to Song of Solomon, to where we'd be like, no, we should care about them, all that. This verse probably, especially with young families, this verse probably goes more towards the women. The women would really love for the husbands to think this about their wives. It'd be like, hey, don't rest them until they, don't wake them until they please, right? This is what they all want for Mother's Day. This is what they all want for Christmas. This is what they want for their birthday, is just to be able to sleep, have unimpeded sleep, and not be disturbed. So, but anyway, all joking aside, it does show, like, a level of, like, love and care for your spouse that you don't want them to be disturbed. Chapter 3, in this song, there's this theme that kind of keeps coming up with her, is that she's dreaming about her husband, okay? She's dreaming about him, and to the point where it's almost turns into like a nightmare, where she's looking for her husband but can't find him. And so it says in verse 5, verse 5 says the same thing as far as, did I miss? Yeah, I didn't write down the right. This is what happens when you write a sermon like the night before, right? You don't have time to proofread it. Look at chapter 3 and verse 1. It says, "By night on my bed I sought him whom my soul loveth. I sought him but found him not. I will rise now and go about the city to the streets, and in the broad ways I will seek him whom my soul loveth. I sought him, but I found him not." Now, this is actually going to be repeated in another portion, and what you'll see is a lot of stuff repeated. So, but in any song, that's kind of what happens, right? You kind of have a repeating or a chorus or something like that, to where it's repetitive. But this dream's going to be brought up again, and you say, well, what's the point? Like, okay, she had a dream about it. whatever, right? What you understand is that usually what you're dreaming about is what you've been thinking about. Dreams come through the multitude of business, okay? And so when it comes to your dreams, a lot of times it happens to be what you were thinking of right before you went to bed or what you've been thinking about all day long. And so it's a testament to what you're thinking about. Who here has had dreams about trying to win someone to Christ, right? A lot of us probably have, just because we go soul winning, and that's just what we do a lot of times, and you're kind of thinking about that. But a lot of times what you're thinking about during the day, whether good or bad, right? Because if you're thinking about horrible things, then you end up having horrible dreams. And so this is a testament that she's thinking about her husband all day. Like, she's literally thinking about him to the point where she's dreaming about him. And she's also having like this nightmare of not being able to find him, okay? And listen, just so you know this, ladies, this is what guys want, okay? Guys want a woman that wants him, okay? Now, you don't have to be speaking his name in your sleep, okay, which it does actually mention, like, causing the lips to speak of them that sleep. But men want to be desired by their wife, right? Just in general, they want to know, the guy wants to know that his wife wants him or desires him, right? And so this is something that on the lady side, you should be looking at this and saying, hey, I should be trying to have that type of relationship to where I'm desired to, do you dream about your husband and all this other stuff, and hopefully it's good dreams, not like getting mad at him like, you cheated on me in my dream, and then you're upset with him or something like that. Okay, but at least that's something, right? You're thinking about him, but just try to make it a little better. I don't know. So in this, and like I said, in this Song of Solomon, it is a love song, but I look at it as kind of like a manual for, like, okay, on the guy's end, here's what the woman wants, right? Here's what they desire. And what you'll see in the book of Song of Solomon is how she talks about how he's an apple tree and how she takes basically refuge under like the shade of his apple tree, right? Meaning, like, basically he's kind of like this protector, like, come under my wings kind of thing. And so women want that protection or that idea of that safety, that comfort, or that refuge, I guess, from the world. So you kind of see that in where we already saw that in chapter 2. Chapter 3, we kind of see something similar to that. It says in verse 6, it says, who is this that cometh out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all powders of the merchant? Which you say, well, what do you get from that? Like, husband, don't smell. Take a bath, smell good, okay? You can always get something out of this, right? Is that one thing that you notice is that they both are talking about how they smell good, okay? So bathe, have good hygiene, right? That type of thing. But notice what it says in verse 7. Behold, his bed, which is Solomon's, 80 valiant men are about it, of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man hath his sword upon his thigh, because of fear in the night. And you notice that what she's speaking of is safety, right? She's speaking of security. So safety, security. His banner over me is love, right? So what I believe, and ladies, you can correct me afterwards. What I believe ladies want is they want a man that's going to protect them, keep them safe, but they also love them, right? So it's kind of like the idea of you want a man that's dangerous, that they're going to be able to basically deal with a bear, deal with someone that's going to hurt them, but they're tender towards you, right? Like that they're loving, they're not abusive towards you or anything like that, but they're loving, they're caring, they'll die for you, but they'll destroy anybody else outside of that. Does that make sense? That's what I kind of see when I see what this woman is stating here, is that his banner over me is love, but he's a force to be reckoned with, right? Like, don't mess with him. And not saying she's like worried about messing with him, but more so like anybody else tries to mess with him or anybody around him, they're going to get messed up. And that's kind of the idea that I believe women are looking for, that safety, but they also want that love. They don't want just someone that's just hard-nosed and brass and like, well, yeah, they can beat up anybody, but they're also just, you know, you can't talk to them. You can't have a good time with that person. You know, they don't want that. You know, don't put the pendulum over there to where you're just like some like juiced up like UFC fighter. It's like, sure, you can take out anybody, right? But no one wants to be around you, okay? So there needs to be a balance there with that. Chapter 4, we see that Solomon admires his wife's beauty in this chapter. And in chapter 4 here, it says in verse 7, it says, that thou art all fair, my love, there is no spot in thee. And throughout here, you know, throughout the chapters and stuff, he'll mention her beauty. But he's just constantly saying she's fair. She's basically above every woman that's out there. And I think that's what way we should treat our wives. And the idea is that don't get sucked into these stupid reels where you're like asking, like, am I the most beautiful woman in the world? You know, and all that stuff. And here's the thing. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent. But in the end, you should make your wife feel like she is. Right? Or the fact that either way, you chose her out of every other woman. Men, we want that too, right? We want our wives we want to at least believe that our wives chose us out of every man that's in the world. Okay, but they also want to, I'm sure, think that, hey, out of every woman that's out there, you chose me. And that's the type of sentiment that we want to get across to them, and it's reciprocal in that, okay? So verse 9 here says, thou hast ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck. And notice that you keep seeing my love, my sister, my spouse, because in verse 10 there it says, how fair is thy love, my sister, my spouse? How much better is thy love than wine, and the smell of thine ointments than all spices? Thy lips, O my spouse, drop as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under thy tongue, and the smell of thy garments is like the smell of Lebanon. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Now, you say, well, why does it keep saying my sister, my spouse? Well, obviously spouse we understand because they're married, but I believe this gets into the fact that we need to be not unequally yoked, meaning this is that my wife is also my sister in Christ, okay? And so therefore, it's kind of showing you that, hey, this should be believers that are in the family of God, right? And therefore, that's paramount when you get married, okay? So if you want to have this really loving relationship and you know, I guess perfect circumstances is that you're married to a believer, but then on top of that, you have this type of love toward one another and all of that. And obviously, you can see you know, obviously the love that he has for her and all that. And so she responds in the last verse here, in verse 16. It says, awake, O north wind, and come, thou south. Blow upon my garden, that the spices thereof may flow out. Let my beloved come into his garden and eat his pleasant fruit. So he's basically talking about, like, she's like a garden. She's like all this stuff, right? And talking about how much he loves her. And she's saying, yeah, come here, right? It's like, yeah, come over here. So, and then chapter 5, he responds with, okay. So, and obviously that's modern vernacular, but it's kind of like, you're like a garden. She's like, come into your garden. And he's like, I'm going to. You know, like that's kind of what's going on here in chapter 5, verse 1. It says, I am come into my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink, yea, drink abundantly, O beloved. So, like I said, it's kind of this back and forth. of the love for one another. Chapter 5, we see that dream being brought up again. So in verse 2 here, so chapter 5, verse 2, she's going to bring up this dream. And again, what you have to understand is that this is what you're striving for in a relationship, okay? And just so you know, like obviously, you know, if you're not married, if you're about to get married, know this is that Song of Solomon is not going to be the everyday occurrence, okay? Like it's not like I come home and my wife's just like, hey, you know, stud, you know, like you're like a hind, you know, or the roe on the mountains, you know, and talking about like my thighs that are like pillars of marbles and all that stuff, and she's just like, you know, and just like that's happening all the time. It's like, no, that's just not the case, especially when you have children, right? This is especially hard to have this be the case when you have children, as far as this type of romance that's going on in a relationship. But it's still something that we don't just throw by. Well, I guess we have little kids, so we can't have any romance. We can't, you know, love each other like, you know, before we had kids, all that stuff. So this dream here just really shows you how much she really loves her husband, okay? It's just the fact of having these type of dreams and having these type of, and listen, I don't believe this is like puppy love stuff. But you could say, well, this is like honeymoon stage. It's like, sure, okay? When you're about to get married and you have that honeymoon stage and the butterflies and all that stuff's there, but listen, it doesn't have to just stop there, right? It's not like, you know, like, okay, yeah, we still need to love our spouse even when the butterflies go away, but they don't have to go away completely, okay? You know, like those butterflies can still be there to a certain extent, okay? And I personally believe that this is a lot of times why divorce happens, why adultery happens, because people are seeking that, right? They're seeking what they had when they first met their spouse, and they're like, they want that again. But what you have to understand is that you can bring that stuff back, okay? It is possible to bring that type of affection back, to bring that type of romance back. It just takes some work. It's not going to happen by itself. Like, you have to try to make that happen, okay? But verse 2 here says, I sleep, but my heart waketh. Some of you guys are probably like, make me sick. You know, like, you're like, this is literally a love sick woman right here, right? And it says, I sleep, but my heart, it waketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, open to me, my sister, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, for my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. I have put off my coat, how shall I put it on? I have washed my feet, how shall I defile them? So basically she's in bed, but she's like, he's at the door, like, how am I supposed to go to the door? It's kind of like, you know, I'm already like in bed, clean, like if I get up, basically my feet are gonna be dirty, all this stuff. Apparently she has a problem with getting her feet dirty going to bed, I don't know, you know. But anyway, it says, my beloved, my beloved put in his hand by the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him. Now, in the Bible, bowels, when it talks about your bowels being moved, it's basically that butterfly feeling, okay? Who here has been on a roller coaster? And when you make that drop, what do you feel? You feel it in your stomach, don't you? And what is that? It's kind of like this adrenaline type of like butterfly feeling, right? Well, it's the same type of feeling that you have when you're like interested in somebody or you like somebody a lot or whatever. It's kind of like that butterfly in the stomach type of effect. So basically, he's coming to the door and like basically she's got butterflies that he's there, okay? And where did I leave off reading there? So, yeah. Verse 5, it says, I rose up to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, and my fingers with sweet-smelling myrrh upon the hands of the lock. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone. My soul failed when he spake. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. So, basically, obviously, it turns into a nightmare. and the fact that she can't find him. She goes into the city looking for him, and then she's basically beat up by the guards for whatever reason. It's basically, you know how dreams go, where you're just like, I was doing this. How am I over here riding a turtle? Like, you're just like, you know, I was preaching the gospel, and now I'm fighting a bear. Like, how did this go from one thing to another? But in the end, I'm sure there's some, like, doctrinal reason why she's getting beat up or wounded by the guards in the street. But I'm looking at this as more of just the surface, like, love song. This is what's going on. She's having dreams about him, basically coming to her bedroom, and she gets up, and then he's not there when she opens the door. And just that kind of disappointment, heartbreak, right, that's going on there. This would be kind of like, you know, like just a simple example of this, maybe not as extreme, but you like somebody and you're texting them back and forth, and they take a little longer to text you back, right? You're just like, they hate me. Like, it's over. They don't like me. Why are they taking so long? And then you find out, like, there's like a really good reason why they couldn't text you or whatever, you know, like, or they couldn't call you or whatever. But you've been there where there's like, they haven't responded to me, you know, they must not like me or whatever. And in all honesty, in a lot of cases, they really do like you. They just didn't have a chance or whatever, right? So things like that, to where when you really like somebody, you'll sometimes get really upset about things that aren't even a big deal, or you'll misread things as far as what's going on in that relationship, okay? Now, it's been a long time since I've been in that position, okay? So I've been married for 10 years out of the dating realm, but I do remember that to a certain extent of, like, when you're talking to somebody and you're wondering, are they interested? Do they like me? I like them, but then, you know, you go back and forth with that. Anyway. So then in chapter 5, what's interesting about this is that we know who the husband is. The husband is Solomon. And in this song, she gives a description of him, which is interesting because anytime you have a Bible character, it's interesting to see, like, a description, right? As far as color, hair color, different things about them, right? And there's certain things that will be brought up about certain people in the Bible. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, for example, Elisha's bald. And the only reason we know that is because some kids were mocking him for being bald, right? But now, like, when you're thinking of Elisha, what do you think? You think of about a bald guy, right? But then there's a lot of characters, you're like, what color hair did they have? You know, what they look like. Did they have red hair? Did they have black hair? Did they have brown hair? You know, like those type of things. In this, we do see some descriptions of Solomon. It says in verse 10, my beloved is white and ruddy. Okay, so he's a white guy, so he's apparently a racist. Joking. But he's white and ruddy in the Bible is talking about more so the fact that they kind of have this kind of red tint to them, meaning this is that they seem very healthy, right? So when someone's like ruddy, it's kind of like, you know, like when you have like rosy cheeks type of thing. You just kind of look, you're flood, like you have blood flowing, you know, and that type of thing. Ruddy is kind of dealing with the term red, you know, like as far as kind of looking red. But it's more so that he doesn't look like an albino, okay? Can I just say that? He looks healthy, right? And not that albinos aren't healthy, but you know what I mean. Like, he's not like Casper the Friendly Ghost, okay? He's white, but he also looks very, like, vibrant, I guess. It says that the chiefest among 10,000. So insert that into the lily of the valley instead of the fairest 10,000. We'll be okay. And change the lily of the valley to the apple tree. I don't know. That probably doesn't rhyme, but there you go. His head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. So we see now that Solomon had bushy hair, but it was also black. Who here thinks of Solomon with like a Father Time beard and gray hair? Okay, no one? No one? Everybody's shaking their head like, okay, after the service, tell me what you think of when you see Solomon, okay? But I think of an old man, like old wise man with spectacles on, like writing Proverbs, okay? Okay, anyway. But he has black, bushy hair, black as a raven. So, I mean, there's no doubt his hair is black. It says, his eyes are as the eyes of doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, of sweet flowers. His lips like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. I guess that's where they got the lily of the valley at. I just figured it out. It has to do with his lips. Joking. That's not where they got that. But anyway, it says his hands are as gold rings set with the beryl. His belly is as bright ivory overlaid with sapphires. So that kind of tells me that this guy's probably, I mean, if it's overlaid with sapphire stones, like his belly, the idea that this guy's probably in pretty good shape. Okay, and it talks about him being like as fast as a roe on the hills and all that stuff. So just kind of talking about his stature. It says his legs are as pillars of marble. This is what my wife says about me all the time, you know. This is why leg day is important, man. You want to be like Solomon, okay? It says, so his legs are as pillars of marble set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Which also shows you that not only, I believe, you know, obviously they're believers, and so therefore they're in the family of God, but also the fact of the matter is that your spouse is your friend. You know, so there should be that aspect there of that friendship that you have, okay? That you can talk to each other as friends. And to be honest, my best friend is my wife. You know, that, now I have best guy friends, I guess, you know. But in the end, there is no one closer to me than my wife. Just facts. There's no one that knows more about me than my wife. And I'm sure the vice versa would be the same for her. And so, you know, don't leave that aspect. Obviously, the romance needs to be there, but just the friendship that comes with having a spouse. Song of Solomon, chapter 6. The one thing I just want to point out with this chapter is the idea of ownership of each other. You know, that's kind of thrown out. It's like, oh, is she, you own your wife? Yeah, but she owns me too. You know, when it comes to do benevolence, it says you don't have power over your own body. And in that aspect, you know, my wife owns me physically. And I own her. You don't like that? Well, you know, take that with God. But the Bible says here in Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 3, it says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. She's the one saying that. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And that is a healthy relationship right there. You know, there's something that's thrown out there that is put out there as a bad word, and that's jealousy. Okay? Jealousy is actually not a bad thing. Okay? Jealousy is basically desiring that which belongs to you. Envy in the Bible, on the other hand, coveting your neighbor's wife or coveting something that doesn't belong to you, that's bad, right? You shouldn't be desiring things that don't belong to you. But listen, me being jealous over my wife, that's good. That means that I'm her, she's mine, and she belongs to me. Now, what people do with that is like, well, you're saying that you're for domestic violence. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. The idea there is that someone that says they don't want their spouse to be jealous over them, they don't understand what that means. Let me ask you a question. If there was a whole bunch of beautiful women just around me and my wife wasn't jealous, I would be concerned. Okay? And they were like flirting with me or talking to me or all that, and my wife's just like, I'm good with that. You know what that tells me is that she doesn't really care about me that much. That she doesn't really have that ownership. She doesn't really say, like, no, he's mine. Get away. Right? And the same would apply if my wife was about a whole bunch of good-looking guys and they're like hitting on her. I'm just like, yeah, who cares? You know what that sends? It sends that you don't care. And whenever, like a guy, some simp, guy that's like basically out there talking about like, I don't care if my wife is just hanging out with a bunch of guys. I don't care. I'm secure in that. It's like, what you're telling me is that you're weak and that you don't actually care about your wife. You don't actually love her enough to say, no, she's mine. Okay? And we need to get back to relationships where we own each other. Okay? And I'm talking about marriage here, okay? If you're dating, you're not at that point where you're owning each other yet, okay? So, but when you're married, we're one flesh. And she's mine, I'm hers, end of story. And if my wife is jealous over some woman that's talking to me, it's like, well, good, she likes me. My wife, that is. Like, good, my wife actually is concerned about me being with her and not with some other woman. Because if you're not jealous over your spouse, when it comes to those certain situations, then you don't care that they're with someone else? Is that what you're getting across? Now, obviously, don't be ridiculous, right? It's like you're at church and some woman like speaks to your husband, or speaks to your husband, and then you're just like, "What was that?" It's like, sorry, they were asking where the creamer was. It's like, don't be ridiculous, okay? But at the same time, you know that there's certain circumstances where if your wife's upset, like jealous, just be like, okay, yeah, you're right, yeah. Actually, take that as a compliment. She may be upset, but be like, well, at least she loves me. At least she wants me to be with her and not someone else. So that's actually a good thing that you have that desire that you want to be have that ownership of your spouse there. Solomon's description of his wife in chapter 7. I know I brought this up, but this before in another sermon dealing with nakedness. But this really does show you that the Bible's discreet. And notice what's mentioned about her and what's not mentioned about her. Okay? So in verse 1 here, it says, "How beautiful are thy feet with shoes, O prince's daughter." And apparently, I just love the fact he's like, with shoes. Your feet are beautiful when there's shoes on them. So keep those shoes on there, right? I don't think that's what he's saying. He's probably just saying, like, obviously, if you're wearing sandals and they're very, like, obviously decorated and stuff like that. Anyway, so it says, "The joints of thy thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a cunning workman. Thy navel is like a round goblet." Okay, so we've gone from the feet to the joints of the thighs. Now, one could say, well, this is the joint of the thigh, but this is what is referred to as the joint of the leg in a lot of cases, which is your knee. So basically what you have is that talking about the feet, the knee, and then it goes straight to the navel, where we get the term navel gazing, like that type of thing. The navel is the belly button, right? So you're going straight to the stomach. Then it goes on to say, thy navel is like a round goblet, which wanteth not liquor. Thy belly is like an heap of wheat set about with lilies. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins. Thy neck is as a tower of ivory. Thine eyes like the fish pools in Heshbon, by the gate of Bath Ribbon. Thy nose is as the tower of Lebanon, which looketh toward Damascus. Thine head upon thee is like Carmel, and thy hair of thine head like purple, and the king is held in the galleries. How fair and how pleasant art thou, O love for delights. So basically, from the feet all the way up to everything about the head and the hair and everything else. But notice what wasn't mentioned? The loins. Okay? And this really shows you, too, that when it comes to nakedness, that's where we're dealing with. You say, even right up here for women, I don't believe this is talking about nakedness. Now, discreet and being modest is another issue, okay, when it comes to that. So this is one reason, too, why I'm not against, breastfeeding that we're not covered, okay? And a lot of people that do that most people in our church cover, but I don't believe this is the same as I don't believe that's nakedness. Now, you could argue that it's not modest, all that type of stuff, but you know what? If it's 120 degrees outside and you're trying to feed your baby, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, okay? And I don't believe it's nakedness. It's obviously not wrong to talk about that area of the body because the Bible talks about it in many different places. And so, yeah, anyway, going on from there, chapter 8, the last chapter here, the conclusion of the song. But these last two verses I'm going to show you here, these are the verses that we used actually at our wedding. So Lily's going to use that she's the lily of the valley. I'm just kidding. I don't know what she's going to use. But these two verses actually were on our cards, that you got for invitations and all this stuff. But it is something that I think with a marriage, this is something that we should all strive for. This is something that to have this type of love, okay, for your spouse. I don't think anybody's getting married and be like, yeah, I don't really care to have that type of love. I think I guarantee every girl wants to have this type of love, when they get married and all of that. I believe that every man really does too, okay? It's not like men are just like these hardened robots that just don't care about anything, okay? You'd be surprised at some men that seem pretty austere that are actually romantic in heart, okay? So, and if you're not, I think you should try to be when it comes to being married. I think you should try to put in some romance in there and try to make that relationship nice. And the Bible talks about to rejoice in the wife of thy youth. And the idea there is that the wife of your youth, meaning like you've been married to her for a while, you need to obviously be ravished by her love always, and to rejoice in the wife of thy youth. And that's something that God has given to us in this life, in a lot of cases, if you're married, to where we can go through this life and not completely hate everything about this life. So anyway, in chapter 8 here in verse 6, it says, set me as a seal upon thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm, for love is strong as death. Jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are coals of fire, which hath a most vehement flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would utterly be contemned. And that is the truth. I mean, listen, there's nothing new under the sun. And literally, most people would give anything that they had for that type of love, that loving relationship there between a man and a woman. And this is something that, jealousy is cruel as the grave, meaning this is that jealousy doesn't feel good necessarily in those cases, right? Like God is a jealous God. His name is jealous. So it's not wrong to be jealous, but when he's jealous, it's because they're going after other gods, and they belong to him. Those people belong to him, and he's jealous for that because of what they're doing. So it's not saying like jealousy is a good feeling, okay? But it does show you how much someone loves you, okay? The reason God is jealous over them is because he loves them and doesn't want them to do that. The reason that your spouse is jealous over you is because they love you and they want you to belong to them, okay? And when it comes to love, love is very strong. And we want to make sure that we don't, when it comes to love, that we don't just pigeonhole it to, well, love is the fulfilling of the law, right? And the fact that if you love me, keep my commandments. And love is just an action of like obedience. And sure, it is in a lot of cases, right? But love is also a feeling, okay? Like we don't just I don't know about, but obviously we want to obey Christ because we love him and we want to show that we love him, but I also just love him, right? I love him for what he did. I care about him, right? I love him as my Savior, as my God. And when it comes to my wife, it's like, yeah, I love her. I would lay down my life for her. I'll protect her, but I also love her, that there's a feeling of love there, right? It's not duty, right? Duty demands it. I must, take care of my wife, right? The idea there is that there should be this feeling there, this emotion that's there, and we want to make sure that we're not just taking emotion out of the equation. I know we're not Pentecostals, okay? I'm not hanging from the chandeliers tonight. We don't have one anyway. But we want to make sure we don't take emotion and that feelings and things like that, like the bowels moving, like when it comes to like the butterflies in the stomach, being lovesick. That is not something that is unbiblical. Like having that type of affection or emotion towards somebody is actually biblical in the sense of a husband and wife. And so this is a great, Song of Solomon is a great book for married couples. And if you're not married, it's something to strive for. That should be what you're looking for, okay? It's not a business contract for making children, okay? It's a relationship with emotions, and you know what, men, we have to realize that emotions exist out there, and we can't just be turning that off all the time. So let's end with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. Thank you for the book of Solomon, Song of Solomon, and Lord, just pray that you help us, especially those that are married, to apply the romance that's in the book of Song of Solomon to our relationships. And Lord, just pray that you be with us throughout the rest of the week. Thank you for the souls that were saved. And Lord, just pray that you'd keep us safe on our travels home. We love you and pray also in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.